Hello, ladies and gents. Justin Johnson. I'm a mature student at university. A lot of teenagers, young adults, mature adults, OPs, they find reading obsolete. They find it too mundane. They come in, they try and listen, and they think, oh, this is out of my depth, or it's not interesting listening. If we be observant and preservant, we will tuition ourselves, understand, and we'll research. So let's not be obsolete and just not take anything in. It's very important, isn't it? It's very, very important. Page 224, the birth of modern state. Being in 1798 and were paid by the state from 1800 were innovative because their jurisdiction had nothing to do with the existing forms of parish authority. They also showed that Britain's empire influenced his home policy too. The Thames police were uniformed and closely supervised, and one of their main tactics were to be preventive, deterring crime. They were not the first force to be organised in this way. However, many of the London parish watch forces had become increasingly efficient in the last decades of the 18th century, and these incremental developments in response to changing social conditions can also be seen as another more gradual path to the module of the Metropolitan Police in 1829. Foremost in this process was the large London parish of St Marylebone in Westminster. By 1800, the Marylebone Watch had a system of patrolling uniformed full-timers who were monitored on the streets by sergeants, themselves under the control of an inspector who had to report on them to the parish authorities. One of their main aims was to prevent crimes in Reynolds 1998, and by the 1820s, they were also providing a day police. By the early 1820s, some precedents for reform were in place, and Parliament slowly moved towards agreeing a direction for police reform in the periods between 1815 and 1829. The year the Metropolitan Police were set up, several parliamentary committees looked at the state of crime and disorder in London. In this period, the most influential was set up by Peel. By then, Home Secretary in 1822, as you have learned in Unit 4, these government inquiries were never agenda free. And usually they were managed so as to hear the evidence that backed up what their sponsors, in this case Peel, wanted to hear. I mean, I was in the city centre today and they was doing a quantitative data uh, research. This lady was about the crime and how police handle things in the town centre. Obviously, I am quite supportive of what the police do. I've had some um, bad things happen to me by them, but no fault of their own. They've done their job. But they are getting stronger on laws and tackling crime, I must admit. So some of the police deserve bravery award for what they do. Turn to page 5.3. Police of the Metro Police 1822 was which is an extract from the report of the select committee set up by Peel. Once you have read this, list the ways in which the strategy for police in London differed from the old parish constable system. These are the points that I thought were most important. Policing was to be concentrated in parts of the capital that were crime hotspots. Police were to patrol continually during the day to harass criminals and on an ongoing basis. The committee recommendations did not become law. Opposition from powerful parishes such as St Marylebone, which wanted to retain control of its own policing, was too great. In addition, the City of London, the square mile, which remained and remains today a self-selecting oligarchic corporation, It resisted any attempt to take over its police functions. In 1829, Peel made a successful attempt to reform and centralise London policing. The Metropolitan Police Act took policing from the hands of parishes and gave it to commissioners responsible to Peel. This act did not, and at the time of writing, still does not, apply to the City of London, but to a very wide area around it that took in all of London's built up area and all the countryside which it is expanding into. Thus, it avoided treading on the city's toes and dealt with the problem of policing the new suburbs. Peel's two commissioners recruited full time police constables who were paid little more than a watchman's wage, but given the powers and responsibilities of constables. Many of the watchmen from the more efficient parish forces, such as that of St Marylebone, were re-employed. Their instructions was clear. They were to prevent crime through the constant deterrent patrolling of a beat, rather than to focus on responding to it after the fact. These men were supervised by a hierarchy of sergeants, inspectors, and superintendents, all of whom were salaried employees, recruited from the social level of senior NCOs, non-commissioned officers in the army, not from the gentlemanly officer class. The control of police on London streets had passed from local government to national government. The constables were not popular with rival police authorities, nor were they welcomed by radicals who correctly saw that they could be used against protesting crowds, as they were in 1830 and 1833, against proponents of parliamentary reform. Palmer, 1998. One of the signs of this antipathy was a number of anti-police cartoons, such as the one shown in figure 5.8. That is figure 5.8 if you're watching in. Page 226, reform of the police outside of London in the urban boroughs and the counties were to prove harder to achieve larger due to a marked aversion to central government interference on the part of regional authorities. Towns and cities did generally see the benefits of police reform and usually responded fairly promptly to a series of legislative measures, including the Lighting and Watching Act of 1833 and the Municipal Corporations Act of 1835, which imposed new expectations around the funding and management of policing in the counties. However, reform was slower to arrive. The Whig government in 1831 drew up a plan for a compulsory and centralised police along the lines of the Metropolitan Police Force, extended over the counties of England and Wales, but abandoned this plan as overly unpopular with traditional local opinion. The moral entrepreneur Edwin Chadwick took the lead in persuading a parliamentary committee to examine the state of constables in rural Britain in 1836. He surveyed every JP's court area to discover the state of crime and law enforcement there, using a set of questions that were remarkably loaded and written on the basis that constables were incompetent and theft was rife. He particularly drew on the rising of crime rates and on the fears of vagrancy and of disruption of traditional local government institutions by rapid change. Like the inquiry into municipal corporations, the final report then paid little attention to those areas that had responded by querying Chadwick's assumptions and painted a picture of advancing crime and disorder that could be stopped only by a full-time police force. The result of this was the Police Act 1839, which allowed counties to set up a new police force if they choose. This would be controlled by the Quarter Session of the Justice of the Peace. Thus, London was the only place where central government actually took over control of policing outside it. The reforms of the 1830s kept policing in both the towns and the countryside in the hands of local government. By 1835, however, it was clear that the new police were a permanent fixture and an important tool in the service of state. Now to the module website and complete activity 5.3. Explaining change in history, a case study of the new police. This should take around an hour. I hope this case study of the development of policing has illustrated two key points, also made elsewhere in the unit. The first is that there was a significant expansion of ambitions of the central state in the period 1789 to 1840. Successive governments were prompted by new ideas, new data, and new social conditions to try to expand the level of control they could exercise over their citizens. Phillips 1980. The second is that the local state did not disappear in this period. Significant power and control continued to be vested in local officials. Indeed, often the same type of official, such as JP, as in the centuries before. Thus, while the central state expanded, it admit in the period and the local state reformed itself to some extent. The interplay between the two remains vital to our understanding of governments and governance during the period. One way that the central state had become more interventionist was by granting new powers and obligations to the local state. In the conclusion of page 229, in 1789, Britain and Ireland was governed primarily by a long-standing patchwork of local authority. The central state was small compared with that of today, and primarily concerned itself with the functions of legislation, war and finance. Other important governance functions, such as the provisions of welfare, the administration of justice, and the maintenance of local infrastructure, were all both funded and organised at a local level. Local government was often provided by unpaid or at least unsalaried amateurs, albeit advised and assisted by small groups of professionals. Power in 1789 was very much linked to property ownership and was also profoundly non-democratic. By 1840, this mixture of central and local governments was still a clear feature of the British state, but two developments were underway. First, the central state, bolstered by the expansion it underwent during the Revolutionary and the Napoleonic Wars, had grown in ambition and scope, whether responding to new ideas and theories or simply acting pragmatically in the face of new social and economic challenges. The central state was becoming increasingly interventionist. Second, local authority was not always comfortable with this, and in many cases resisted central initiatives, with the effect that many of the governance arrangements made during this period were compromises that retained elements of both central and local control. Overall, however, and regardless of whether we consider the central or local state, the state was larger and more interventionist in 1840 than it was in 1789. There had been a shift towards nationally uniform systems set in place by parliamentary action, and often now linked to the public policy lobbyists. It was now much easier for the state to grow further and intervene more in lives of its subjects. Go back for the unit and through any notes you may have taken. Make a note of some of the explanatory points made within the unit that you think support the extent to which ideas were the basis of government structures and drivers of change, or proposals of change, and also some of those points where you can find evidence the response to challenges was the important factor. I'm expecting you to end up with between 2 or 4 points for each ideas challenges. Record it in whatever format is most convenient to you, then compare what you got the notes made in exercise 5.1. Have your conceptions of the cause of change stayed the same? Here's a specimen answer. It's been listed here. The idea of corruption was important in framing debates about political reform. New knowledge such as statistics and government inquiries were utilised to justify political reform. The ideas put forward by moral entrepreneurs were important in shaping how reform occurred. Theories proposed by thinkers such as Beccara underpinned reforms within the criminal justice system. Its challenges, mechanism, local government, including the police, were quite adaptable to change and were already evolving to meet changing social conditions by the 1790s. There were strong links between property ownership and political power. It was not until changing social conditions seemed to threaten property through public disorder, crime, and social unrest that changes in government were instituted. Undemocratic local government institutions, such as closed corporations, did not reform themselves. It was only when central government saw the need to act change was enforced. War was clearly a key driver in the expansion of the central state. This unit had looked at some of the shifts in government in the early 19th century and shown you the balance between ideas such as utilitarianism, democratic thought, and the work of the criminologist Beccaria, and a need to respond to changes such as war, urban growth, crime, and disorder. Subsequent units, you'll see how and to what extent New Direction governments in Victorian Britain followed these models. We're on Unit 6, Imaginations Are Real. This aims on page 243. This unit will explore how United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was formed both politically and socially, analyse the distinction between the terms state and nation. Evaluate the role of the national identity played in British and Ireland, popular political movements during the period. State and nation. In the 1780s, there were two distinct but connected political entities to be found in the British Isles, the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain. In January 1801, these kingdoms joined together to form a new political entity, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, in section 6.1. You'll begin this unit by looking at some of the events leading up to formation of this new state. Of course, political union did not necessarily mean that all of the people living in British Isles suddenly felt that they had come together as one nation. Therefore, you'll be introduced to scholarly debate about nations and nationality. You'll learn that the period spanning the late 18th and early 19th centuries is often regarded as a time in which these concepts gained popular currency, in part due to arguments about the sovereignty of the people associated with the French Revolution. Industrialisation and urbanisation may also be contributed to the development of nations and nationalism. And you analyse this by focusing on the role of printing technology and print culture. In section 6.3, you'll move on from these debates about the formation of nations generally to consider national identity in the United Kingdom. So specifically, section 6.3 will consider British national identity and evaluate the extent to which two popular political movements, opposition to Catholic emancipation and the parliamentary reform movement, helped to foster a shared sense of Britishness among people living in the new state, as political developments in Ireland differed significantly from those in Britain. Section 6.4 will focus specifically on popular politics in an Irish context. Page 245. Uniting the Kingdoms. United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland was a result of the merging of separate states over a long period of time. By 1800, Wales and England had already been politically integrated for centuries. The Statute of Wales 1284 had extended English rule to the Principality, and a series of acts passed from 1536 to 1543 had paved the way for complete unification. By the late 18th century, the political and legal system of England and Wales were completely integrated, and elected representatives for both countries sat in the House of Commons at Westminster. Dickinson, 2007. Although the crowns of Scotland and England had been unified in 1603, the Kingdom of Scotland remained a distinct political entity with its own representative institution, the unicameral Parliament of Scotland. Until 1707, that year, Scotland entered into a political union with England and Wales. Creating a new state, the Kingdom of Great Britain thereafter, 45 Scottish representatives joined the ranks of English and Welsh MPs and the House of Commons. Scotland retained significant autonomy with its own legal and educational system, had a distinct Presbyterian established church. The Kingdom of Great Britain existed until 1801, when Ireland entered into political union with England, Scotland, and Wales. In the figure 6.1 shows a political cartoon published in 1799 when negotiations for the union between the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain were underway. It depicts a group of men gathered together in what seems to be a marriage ceremony. To the right hand of the image, you can see the couple Paddy, an Irishman, and Mr. Ball, or John Ball, a male personification of England and Britain. In this case, dressed in a cloth of an agricultural worker, both holding hats in their hands. To the left, and the Scottish man wearing a tartan sash officiates at the ceremony holding a book in which the words "A History of Scotland" are visible. Meanwhile, in English joins Paddy and Mr. Ball's hand, saying, "Whom I put together, let no man put asunder." Another character is visible to the far left of the image, holding the wet blankets on which, just visible, the words tax and income are written. Page 246. This exercise. Take a few minutes, look carefully at 6.1, focusing particularly on the facial expressions of Paddy and Mr. Ball. There is a zoomable version of the image available on the module website. Don't forget also to read the image caption. What does the image seek to imply about the nature of the proposed political union between Ireland and Britain? The image depicts a political union as an arranged marriage between reluctant parties. Paddy looks angry or upset, whereas Mr. Ball looks confused, as though he isn't quite sure what is happening. The figure to the far left, holding wet blankets, in addition, indication that there may have been a financial motivation on the part of those arranging the marriage. The image caption reinforces the idea of an arranged marriage and raises concerns for the future success of the union. In figure 6.1, thus hints that the political union between Great Britain and Ireland did not result from a great love between the two kingdoms, and the following subsection will consider why this was the case. Union with Ireland. From 1177 to 1541, the English king also held the title Lord of Ireland in theory. This meant that the King of England ruled all of Ireland, but in practice his authority was limited to certain areas. The Kingdom of Ireland was created in 1541 as part of the wider efforts of the part of the Tudor authorities to gain firmer control of the country and introduced the Protestant Reformation in Smith 2001. While English authority was eventually extended over the entire island, the Reformation was limited in its impact. Neither the bulk of the native population, the Gaelic Irish, nor those of Anglo-Norman descent. A group sometimes described as the Old English conformed to the Church of Ireland, the Protestant established Church of the Kingdom, whereas the latter group had traditionally been ruling the elite of the country. They were replaced in their capacity by new Protestant settlers. By the beginning of the 18th century, the Parliament of the Kingdom of Ireland was a wholly Protestant assembly, very similar in terms of structure and procedure of that of the Westminster. 300 elected representatives sat in the House of Commons, while members of the aristocracy and Church of Ireland bishops sat in the House of Lords. For much of the century, the Irish Parliament could be regarded as subordinate to its Westminster counterpart. Powning's Law 1494, a law that had evolved significantly over the course of the 17th century, meant that the draft bills originating in Ireland had to receive the approval of the Privy Council in London before they were put to Irish MPs. Furthermore, a Declaratory Act of 1720 saw the British Parliament assert the right to legislate for Ireland. Although Irish MPs played a significant role in drafting legislation, Powning's law remained a grievance. Meanwhile, any British interference in Irish affairs, particularly efforts on the part of the Westminster Assembly to legislate for Ireland directly, had the potential to stir up intense hostility from Ireland's excluded Protestant political elite.